A gracious good day to one and all once again. 'Tis I, Norton the First, by grace of God, Emperor of the United States, and Protector of Mexico. Back with you all once again for episode number 181 of Emperor Norton's fantastic history vlog. Today is January 13, 2021. We're covering the 13th through the 19th of January today, and it is our 303rd day living under COVID-19 restrictions. We've crossed 300. Wow. Incredible. Just a couple little words about what happened last week at the Capitol. Well, the Capitol, because it is our empire. But this is no way to behave. And it's very dangerous. And we hope that cooler heads prevail, and in the end, we'll recognize that we are your emperor. Never forget that. Well, enough politics. Let us now get on to our national days. Starting with the 13th, it is International Skeptics Day. I don't think so. And also, it is Public Radio Broadcast Day. Let's move on to the 14th. It is National Hot Pastrami Sandwich Day. Oh yes, very, very good. You know, I like it on white bread with mayonnaise, lettuce, and tomato. No. There's only one proper way to eat a hot pastrami sandwich, and that's on rye with mustard by imperial decree. The 15th. National Hat Day, and in honor of that, we wore the original hat today. This one served us well for about 7 years, and it's held up really well. Look at that. And now this is an antique top hat. I don't know if you can see inside there. It is, there we go. It is from Walter Barnard and Son, 97 Jermyn Street, St. James, London. Purchased by us in 1974. It was an antique then, and it has served us very, very well. But we do have another hat we wear. It's more colorful and purple. That's the one we normally wear. Well, back to the national days. The 16th, International Hot and Spicy Food Day. How hot do you like your food? How spicy? We like it very spicy, till the ears burn. The 17th, Cable Car Day, a great day here in San Francisco. We'll explain why later on. The 18th is Martin Luther King Day, which should be observed by all Americans. And the 19th is National Popcorn Day. Oh, we love popcorn. Well, there's not much food we don't like, but there you go. Well, let's move on now to our Florida Man segment. Oh, we've got 3 today. Couldn't choose. We'll start with the 13th. Florida man threatens to kill neighbors with machete named Kindness. This is our favorite Florida man story. Remember this one popped up last year. He told his neighbors he was going to kill them with kindness, and then came back with a machete that had kindness written on it. If that is not Florida man, we don't know what is. Well, anyway. The 15th. Florida man hits vehicle, then steals vehicle belonging to Good Samaritan who stopped to help. No good deed goes unpunished, they say, whoever they are. 16th, Florida man confesses to cops, says, Jesus told me to drive Ferrari 360 off pier. No comment. Well, for our San Francisco stories today, and we have 3, also couldn't choose, we're relying, as we so often do, on the writings from John Ralston in his wonderful book, This Date in San Francisco. Let's begin with January 13, 1958. Columnist Herb Caen returned to the Chronicle after 8 years at the Examiner. In 1936, gawky 20-year-old Herbert Eugene Caen came to San Francisco for an appointment with Chronicle editor Paul Smith. He'd brought a hat to make himself look older, but on the Oakland-San Francisco ferry boat, a wind blew that hat away. Young Caen presented himself to Smith's tough-talking Irish secretary with uncovered bristly hair. My God, she shrieked in mock horror. They're selling us kids in fright wigs now. Caen was born in Sacramento on April 3rd, 1916, to French immigrant Lucien Caen and his German wife, Augusta Gussie. They came from a musical family. Herb Caen's first column under his name appeared in the Chronicle on July 5th, 1938, under the heading, It's News to Me. After an introductory paragraph, keep it short, kid, about the 4th of July, he wrote about next month's arrival of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who would speak in honor of the Golden Gate International Exposition. Caen's column, a mix of celebrity sightings, gossip, scoops, items heard at watering holes, one of his best sources, along with jabs at the high and mighty, caught on, and he was soon a recognized figure and a ladies' man. After serving as a squadron communications officer and reconnaissance analyst in World War II, Caen went back to writing his Chronicle column. Although he was sometimes dismissed as just a gossip columnist, Caen took seriously the obligation of the Fourth Estate to keep watch on government. In 1950, Caen had a salary dispute with the Chronicle, and on February 1st, 1950, the Examiner ran a front-page story about Baghdad in the Bay, the banner under which it would run Caen's column. Caen's first Examiner column on Sunday, February 5th concluded, San Francisco, the Queen City. For years, it has been fun to chronicle her. It'll be even more fun, I know, to examine her again and again. He was known for his puns. The Chronicle used some of its best writers to compensate for Caen to no avail, losing circulation. It rehired Caen in 1958 at a remarkable $38,000 per year. On January 13, 1958, a van of Market Street van and storage delivered what the Chronicle called a small mountain of memorabilia to the offices at 5th and Mission. Chronicle advertisers welcomed Caen home, and in Caen's first Chronicle reappearance, January 16, he gave thanks for being back in the corner I occupied for all the years I care to remember. Mr. San Francisco, Herb Caen. If you've never read any of his writing, there's a lot of books out there. One of his best is Baghdad by the Bay. We strongly recommend reading him. Let's move on now to January 14, 1954, and this is where one of the worst fake stories about San Francisco comes from, but we'll get to that. Joseph Paul DiMaggio was born in Martinez, California in 1915, the 8th child of Sicilian immigrant fisherman Giuseppe Paolo and his wife Rosalie. Norman Jean Baker, later Marilyn Monroe, was born in a Los Angeles Charity Ward Hospital in 1926 to a mother who was between marriages and an unknown father, two people of humble origins who became 20th century icons. Monroe's publicist circulated a story that Monroe and DiMaggio met on a blind date, but more likely DiMaggio saw Monroe at the Roosevelt Raceway, Long Island in spring 1952. By 1953, they were often seen together in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. In January 1954, Monroe had a brief break from filming after withdrawing from a movie with Frank Sinatra. On the 14th, the couple appeared in the San Francisco City Hall third floor chambers of Judge Charles Peary. In contrast to DiMaggio's first marriage, the Church of Saints Peter and Paul in North Beach, it was a small affair. The ceremony, witnessed by a reporter who climbed onto a desk to look over the chamber's open transom, did not go smoothly. There was no marriage license, and court clerk David Dunn was sent to fetch a blank one and a typewriter to fill it out. DiMaggio emerged with his bride flashing a new diamond ring. "We are very happy," she said. Asked if the couple planned a family, DiMaggio seemed flustered, but guaranteed that they would have at least one. "I'd like to have 6, giggled Monroe. The couple embraced and kissed as flashbulbs popped, answered a few more questions, and then tried to leave, but taking a wrong turn in one of the enormous building's halls, they ended up in the real estate development department. Doubling back, they found an elevator, but when the doors opened on the first floor, there was another crowd. They continued to the basement, only to find still another crowd. Shoving their way out to the McAllister Street, the couple posed by a blue Cadillac in which they finally escaped. Monroe had forgotten her coat in Judge Peary's chambers, but didn't go back. Judge Peary was crestfallen. He'd forgotten to kiss the bride. Now, There is a story that circulates, and we have heard many a tour guide and many a recorded tour on buses say that they were married at St. Peter and Paul in North Beach, but they couldn't get married there because they had both been divorced, and his first marriage was, DiMaggio, was not properly annulled. I've heard people say that they had their photos taken on the steps of St. Peter and Paul. That proves they got married there. The photo doesn't exist. If anyone can show me the photo, I'll change the story, but that is a completely false story to the best of my knowledge. Now, the church still displays a picture of Joe DiMaggio marrying his first wife there. Let's move on to our last San Francisco story for today. January 16, 1865, the DeYoung brothers begin the San Francisco Chronicle, the oldest newspaper in San Francisco and the only one daily left of the ones that were dominant in the 10 or so years after the city's founding. According to legend, 20-year-old Charles DeYoung asked 16-year-old Michael to borrow money from their landlord to start a newspaper. Charles showed a lone $20 gold piece to a local job printer who supplied second-hand type inking equipment, and a desk. The DeYoung brothers' daily dramatic chronicle was mostly advertising and was distributed free like supermarket handouts today. With a mixture of florid style of the day and youthful enthusiasm, Volume 1, Number 1 proclaimed, "We make our politest bow with one hand upon the left side of our blue and green plaid waistcoat, one foot being thrown gracefully forward in the operatic managerial style, and our glistening new sombrero held negligently resting on our left hip bone." And of course it is, as I said, the only daily left in San Francisco. We used to have, in excess of 5 at one time, but newspapers are kind of a thing of the past, but long live the Chronicle indeed. Well, let's move on to our other history for today. Starting with the 13th of January, 1898, Émile Zola publishes his open letter, J'accuse, accusing the French government of framing Alfred Dreyfus for sabotage. 1923, tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. Taking advantage of the chaotic condition of Germany, Hitler stages a demonstration of 5,000 stormtroopers and denounces the November crime. 1930, Mickey Mouse comic strip first appears. Now, it's not the first appearance of Mickey Mouse, just the comic strip. I don't know if I got that right. 1979, YMCA, the YMCA files a libel suit against the Village People's YMCA song. It's brought them more publicity than anything, probably, but I still wonder how that became a wedding song. I mean, read between the lines and the lyrics like you can with any Village People song, and you'll find out what the song's really about. Anyway, 2000, Microsoft chair Bill Gates steps aside as chief executive and promotes company president Steve Ballmer to the position. Moving on to the 14th, 1858, French Emperor Napoleon III escapes an attempt on his life by Felice Orsini, an Italian patriot who was later executed. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. 1878, U.S. Supreme Court rules race separation on trains is unconstitutional. 1939, all commercial ferry services between San Francisco and the East Bay end. Now, of course, they were reestablished in the 1980s and are going better than ever. But it would seem that there was no need for them after the building of the bridges. Well, as it turns out, there was. 1963, George Wallace is sworn in as governor of Alabama. His address states, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Dustbin of history. 1979, remember, this was in 1979. U.S. President Jimmy Carter proposes Martin Luther King's birthday to be a national holiday. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. Moving on to the 15th, 1559, Elizabeth I, crowned Queen of England in Westminster Abbey. 1797, the first top hat is worn by John Etherington of London. I thought it would have been earlier than that, but maybe I'm confusing that with the stovepipe hat. 1870, the donkey is first used as a symbol of the Democratic Party in Harper's Weekly in a drawing by Thomas Nast, who also created the elephant for the Republicans. 1911, the first airplane bombing experiments with explosives is held in San Francisco. I'm guessing that's probably Crissy Field, but I don't know for sure. 1927, the Tennessee Supreme Court overturns, on a technicality, John T. Scope's guilty verdict for teaching evolution, but the law itself remains in force. 1947, the brutalized corpse of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, is found in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. The crime is still unsolved. 1976, Sarah Jane Moore is sentenced to life for attempting to shoot U.S. President Gerald Ford. That took place at the north entrance of the Hotel St. Francis, on Post Street at Powell here in San Francisco. And she was paroled in 2007. 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, calls for an international ban on landmines, angering ministers in the UK. Oh, she was good at that, usually for a good cause. 2009, Chesley Sully, lands U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River shortly after takeoff from LaGuardia Airport in New York City. All passengers and crew members survive in what becomes known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Moving on to the 16th, 1605. The first edition of Don Quixote by Cervantes is published in Madrid. We see a lot of parallels between our story and Don Quixote's. Maybe we'll do something with that someday. 1793, French King Louis XVI, sentenced to death by the National Convention during the French Revolution. Once again, heavy is the head that wears the crown. But that's what happens when you mistreat your people. You wouldn't catch us doing that. 1847, John C. Fremont is appointed governor of the New California Territory. 1919, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, authorizing the prohibition of alcohol, is ratified by a majority of U.S. states. A sad, sad day. 1920, the first assembly of the League of Nations is held in Paris. Our idea. 1939, the daily comic strip Superman debuts. That's the daily, not the comic book. 1945, Adolf Hitler moves into the Führer bunker, his underground bunker in Berlin, and does not emerge alive. 1970, Buckminster Fuller receives the Gold Medal Award from the American Institute of Architects for his geodesic dome. 1974, Jaws by Peter Benchley is published by Doubleday. 2020, impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump begins in the Senate. They are impeaching him in the House as we speak. Moving on to the 17th, the first cable car patented by Andrew Smith Halliday in the U.S., but does not begin service for over 2 years. 1904, Anton Chekhov's play The Cherry Orchard opens at Moscow Art Theater. 1929, Popeye makes his first appearance in the comic strip Thimble Theater. I believe his only line that first strip was, "What'd you think, I'm a cowboy?" 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower delivers a televised farewell address to the nation 3 days before leaving office, in which he warns against the accumulation of power by the military-industrial complex. Go back and listen to that speech. It's very foretelling. 1987, U.S. President Reagan signs secret order permitting covert sales of arms to Iran. The 18th, 1777, San Jose is founded. Congratulations. 1944, first Chinese naturalized U.S. citizen since the repeal of the Exclusion Act. 1980, Studio 54 owner Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager sentenced to 3 years in prison for tax evasion and fined $20,000. 1993, now I know we talked about President Carter proclaiming Martin Luther King Day. 1993, that was back in 1978. Okay, anyway, 1993, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday observed in all 50 states of the USA for the first time. Oh yeah, racism's dead. 2005, the world's largest commercial jet, the Airbus 380, is unveiled in France. What a flop that was. What an amazing plane. But between the time they conceived it and the time it started sales, the model for how airlines were going to get people from one place to another switched from big airplanes, moving them to certain hub cities, to smaller airplanes doing shorter routes. Oh well. Moving on to the 19th, 1915, the neon tube sign is patented by George Claude. We love neon. 1943, the first Warsaw Ghetto Uprising begins. 1955, Scrabble debuts on the board game market. We thought it was older than that, but apparently not. 1970, UCLA fires Angela Davis for being a communist. 1978, the last Volkswagen Beetle made in Germany leaves VW's plant in Emden. Beetle production in Latin America would continue until 2003. Let's now move on to our births for today. Starting with the 13th, 1884, the Sophie Tucker. We, of course, if you've tuned into some of the weekend vlogs with the Countess, she's made a guest appearance. Check it out. 1931, Charles Nelson Riley. We once interviewed Charles Nelson Riley, but we must say, one does not interview Charles Nelson Riley. One turns on the tape recorder and lets him just go. It was actually a very good interview. Speaking of people we used to live by, 1934, Rip Taylor, who passed away recently. We used to live in West Hollywood, and his photo was up in every dry cleaner, I swear. We swear, in West Hollywood, every single one. 1943, Richard Mall from Night Court. 1966, Tabitha Stevens, fictional character from the show Bewitched. Moving on to the 14th. 1741, Benedict Arnold. 1892, Hal Roach, early film director and producer. 1904, Cecil Beaton, English photographer. 1915, Mark Goodson, American game host producer, born in Sacramento. This has been a Mark Goodson and Bill Todman television production. Not this, but if you like game shows, you probably know what I'm talking about. 1940, Julian Bond, American civil rights leader and politician. 1941, actor Faye Dunaway. 1943, speaking of actors, Holland Taylor. We like her a lot. 1944, Marjoe Gortner. You may remember him. He was an evangelist, later turned actor, born in Long Beach, California. Didn't know that. 1948, musician, producer, T-Bone Burnett. 1969, Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters, and of course Nirvana. Now, here's a question. Do the Foo Fighters fight Foo, or do they use Foo to fight? Leave your comments down below if you know the answer to that question. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and we accept donations. Let's move on to the 15th, 1412, Joan of Arc. 1622, the playwright Moliere. 1906, Aristotle Onassis, the billionaire, former husband of Jackie Kennedy Onassis. 1908, Edward Teller, the father of the H-bomb. 1913, Lloyd Bridges, born in San Leandro. He was so great on Sea Hunt, and of course, his two sons, Bo and Jeff, great actors on their own. 1929, Queen Ida, formed for Zydeco, famous for Zydeco music. 1929, Martin Luther King Jr. That's why we celebrate his birthday. 1937, actor Margaret O'Brien. 1941, Captain Beefheart, Don Van Villet. If you've never heard his records, well, they take a little, it's an acquired taste. We'll just leave it at that, but he was a real groundbreaker. 1947, Andrea Martin, who was so great on Schitt's Creek. Oh, that's not, wait, she was on Schitt's Creek, that's another one. Well, she was great on SCTV. Sorry, Catherine O'Hara. And Catherine O'Hara was great on Schitt's Creek. Oh God, especially that last episode with the wedding. What an outfit. Woo! Wait. 1908, The Merm, Ethel Merman. Ever heard her disco album? It's really, really good. 1979, Carl Karcher, founder of Carl's Jr. hamburger chain, notorious far-right activist in Orange County as well. Used to fund a lot of extreme right and anti-gay organizations, especially the Traditional Values Coalition. And speaking of homophobes, 1947, Dr. Laura Schlesinger. Moving on to the 17th now. 1706, Benjamin Franklin, the only president of the United States who was never president of the United States. Now, 1880, speaking of silent screen, Max Sennett, famous for the Keystone Cops, discovered Charlie Chaplin. 1899, Al Capone, who served some time in Alcatraz. Did they ever open that safe? I don't know. 1928, Vidal Sassoon. If you don't look good, we don't look good. 1952, 1952, Larry Fortensky, the seventh and final husband of Elizabeth Taylor. Ooh, boy, what a disaster. Pardon me. 1964, former First Lady Michelle Obama. Happy birthday, Michelle. The 18th. 1782, Daniel Webster, Secretary of State. 1882, A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh, our favorite childhood book, and we still have that copy. 1933, Ray Dolby, the sound engineer. 1944, Legs Larry Smith, a drummer for the Bonzo Dog Band and a great tap dancer, I might add. 1951, Elijah Cummings, representative from Maryland and civil rights activist. Let's move on now to the 19th, 1807, Robert E. Lee from the Civil War. 1809, Edgar Allan Poe. 1839, the painter Paul Cézanne. 1926, Jeane Kirkpatrick, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. 1928, Galt McDermott wrote all the music for the musical Hair. 1933, actor Cicely Tyson. And 1993, Jack Schlossberg, son of Carolyn Kennedy and grandson of John F. Kennedy. Let's now move on to our deaths for today. Starting with the 13th, 1929, Wyatt Earp from the shootout at the OK Corral. He is buried in Colma in a Jewish cemetery, even though he's not Jewish. That's a long story. We may go into that someday when we start doing the new format of one in-depth story and then a little bit of commentary. I'd like to get some feedback on that if you'd like to see this format stay or if you'd like to see the new format. But we won't be doing that until March when we've come up on a year and don't want to repeat a lot of stories over again. 1962, a real pioneer of television, one of our favorites, Ernie Kovacs, died in a most unfortunate car crash in Beverly Hills or West Hollywood. There seems to be some discrepancy about this, but we do know it was in a Corvair. 1978, Hubert Humphrey, the 38th Vice President of the United States. Moving on to the 14th, 1742, Edmund Halley, English mathematician and astronomer, Halley's Comet, hello. 1898, Lewis Carroll, love his writings. 1977, Peter Finch. He was in the movie Network. I think he got a posthumous Oscar for that. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Great movie. 1978, Blossom Rock from, she played Grandmama on The Addams Family. She was the sister of Jeanette MacDonald. Blossom Rock was also a navigation hazard in San Francisco Bay that was imploded rather spectacularly in the 1800s. 1984, Ray Kroc. Now, in the listing, he was credited as the founder of McDonald's. No, that was the McDonald brothers in San Bernardino. But he was the one who really started franchising McDonald's and built it into the empire that it is today. In fact, there's a wonderful movie with Michael Keaton called The Founder about his story. Great movie. 1986, Donna Reed, The Donna Reed Show, It's a Wonderful Life. 1988, Georgy Melenkov, Soviet leader who was briefly leader of the Soviet Union after Stalin's death. He's portrayed in the movie The Death of Stalin, which is hilarious, by Jeffrey Tambor. Moving on to the 15th of January. 1915, Fanny Hart Farmer, American culinary pioneer who revolutionized modern cooking through the introduction of precise measurements in her Boston Cooking School cookbook. Got a copy or two of that. 2018, and I always mispronounce her name, but I'll do my best, Mathilde Krim, American medical researcher and founding chair of AMFAR, the Foundation for AIDS Research, real hero of the AIDS pandemic. Let's move on to the 16th now. 1917, George Dewey, Admiral of the Navy, won the Battle of Manila Bay. The Dewey Monument in Union Square is in his honor. 1942, Carole Lombard, great actor, died in a plane crash during World War II. She was married to Clark Gable at the time. He never got over it. 1979, bad day for cast of the Addams Family, apparently, because it was also the day that Ted Cassidy, who played Lurch, died. 2013, Abigail Van Buren, Pauline Phillips was her real name, American columnist and radio show host. Dear Abby was her advice column. Twin sister of fellow advice column Ann Landers, whose name was Epi. Moving on to the 17th, 1861. Oh dear. The Countess Lola Montez of Mansfeld. Don't tell the Countess. I think she'd be upset if she found out she was dead. 1874, Chang and Eng Bunker, the Siamese twins. 1893, Rutherford B. Hayes, 19th U.S. President. 1933, Louis Comfort Tiffany, American artist and designer. He makes great breakfasts, by the way. Moving on to the 18th, 1862, John Tyler, the 10th U.S. President. 1936, the writer Rudyard Kipling. 1949, Carlo Ponzi, the Italian con man, the namesake of the Ponzi scheme. 1980, Cecil Beaton, British photographer. 2011, Sergeant Shriver, activist in the Peace Corps, Kennedy by marriage. On the 19th, 1980, William O. Douglas, a member of the Supreme Court from 1939 to 1975. That was a long time. And 1990, the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, leader of the Rajneesh movement. He rode around in Rolls Royces, and there was actually one of his outlets, so we say, in Laguna Beach. And I believe there was one here in San Francisco, too. Well, for our quote today, we end with two from Rudyard Kipling. He came to San Francisco, didn't like it very much, wrote a scathing letter to his father about how much he despised the city. And if you'd like to hear that letter in its entirety, there is a just wonderful history podcast called Sparkle Tack. Just Sparkle, T-A-C-K, and 66 episodes about San Francisco history. Is episode about us, about Lola, very good. Is one about Alma Spreckles, episode 66, is very good. I don't have the episode number for his Rudyard Kipling one, but it's in there, and it's really, really good. Well, anyway, eventually Kipling would succumb to our charms here in San Francisco. Quote 1, San Francisco is a mad city inhabited for the most part by perfectly insane people, but whose women are of a remarkable beauty. And finally, San Francisco has only one drawback. 'Tis hard to leave, and that's the truth. Well, that just about wraps it up for this edition. Now, as we said earlier, we do accept tips. We appreciate all of our wonderful donors. Here's where we can get the information for that. Also, we, with the Countess, are launching the fantastic San Francisco Trivia Quest this Saturday via Zoom. There's going to be 3 rounds of 10 questions each, valuable prizes to the winners. So if you'd like to sign up for that, probably the best thing to do is to email us at emperornortontour@gmail.com. We'll send you the link to sign up for tickets. It's $10. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's San Francisco trivia in the beginning, but we're going to open it up for trivia from other places down the line. We're hoping to make this a weekly show, but we'll see how the first one goes. Also, if you want more information about San Francisco history in general, here's the link for that. Click on the Emperor Norton's Fantastic San Francisco Time Machine button, and that will take you to the link for Sparkle Tack. Just look under Useful San Francisco links for that. So until we see you again, stay safe, stay inside, and therefore stay healthy. If you do go outside, wear a mask. Do not take unproven cures that might kill you. The vaccine is here. It's getting distributed more widely. Hopefully, we're going to lick this thing real soon. Do not attempt to overthrow the government. Be kind to one another. Until we see you again, a gracious good day.